Welcome to Sacrifice and Success, a podcast that looks at what we give up in order to thrive. I'm John Hegarty, chairman of Soho-based independent media agency Electric Blue. In this series, I'm talking to people from the creative industries about what they have sacrificed to be where they are today. With me today is Andi Osho, actor, writer, producer, and podcast host. From an early age, Andi forged her own path in the entertainment industry, not letting herself be pigeonholed into any one area, and is now firmly established as a versatile entertainment personality. The most recent string to her bow being a published author with her debut novel, Asking for a Friend, released earlier this year. Andi.
Hello.
First of all, fantastic meeting you. Wonderful to see you. We're doing this over Zoom because, as we all know, there's this terrible pandemic. So rather than me sitting in a room with Andi, I'm having to do it with digital technology. But it's brilliant whatever way we do it. So, Andi, this is all about what you have to sacrifice to succeed. And I always like to start with a question of what have you sacrificed today?
Wow. Oh, that's a good question. Today, I've sacrificed being in the sunshine.
Oh, now you make me feel really bad.
No, I mean, I do it a lot. But yeah, I mean, when you say sacrifice, I mean, it's a choice, isn't it? Hopefully, anyways, it's a choice. I've chosen to do what I'm doing today. And I had another job, a voiceover, basically, earlier. So I had to be in for that as well. So that's just the breaks. Hopefully there'll be more than one sunny day this year as well.
Yeah, exactly. We're hoping, yeah. But just to start, and looking at, you were born in East London, in Plaistow, and your parents were Nigerian, came to this country, you were born here. I've always thought there's a great song, a song I love, and it's called Across the Borderline. It's by Ry Cooder. The best version of it is, I think, by Willie Nelson. But it talks about the sacrifices people make to kind of hopefully go for a better life. They leave somewhere, go somewhere else. And I've always admired those people and the gift they give to the country they come to. Your parents did that. They came here and now here. Do you think there was a sort of benefit you had from having this background, Nigerian, but yet born in London, and what that gave you creatively?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think there's a lot of people who have a similar background to me, and we have, I think, a similar outlook in the sense of our parents came here, first generation, had starting from scratch basically in an environment that wasn't always welcoming. You know, if I'm honest, like what it was like in the UK in the sort of late 60s, early 70s, but they just had this kind of can-do spirit that this is going to work, and their requirement to create security, I think, gave people like me and fellow artists from a similar background a sort of safe platform from which to explore and go, oh, I don't need to worry so much about security because my parents gave me that.
That's
now
brilliant.
I can look at being something a bit more risky, like an artist or something.
The other great thing I think too is as a creative person, because you've pursued a creative career, is in a way creative people tend to be outsiders looking in. And that's part of what makes, I think, you a better creative person. So this sense of you had this Nigerian background, you had British friends, you were living in a London culture, all of those things did you find that you were able to observe much more?
Yeah, but if I wasn't consciously doing it knowing that it would be useful for a career in the arts at some point. I was just feeling like I'm on the outside, never quite feeling like I fit in or knowing where I belong. Well, you know, I mean, that's just life, isn't it? I mean, I think there's lots of us outsiders, you know, but we just sort of find a tribe. And that's what I did. Certainly at school, I was such a sort of sensitive, sort of odd, crazy, creative kid who wanted homework and loved studying and stuff. So I had to find my tribe, and the general school body is not really like that. So you have to find the people that are, so that you can feel a sense of fitting in.
So again, you didn't have a teacher that kind of you look to, who inspired you or pushed you in certain directions?
Yeah, I wish I did. I mean, I hear a lot of people talk about, that teacher that inspired them and thank you so much, Mrs. Blah, 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 for everything you gave me. That's why I'm a writer. It's just like, I didn't have that at all. I often thought that was to do with the teachers, but I'm now willing to accept that could have been to do with me not being like a particularly attentive student at the time. So
I'm going to put it down to their loss. Actually.
Yes, it was their big mistake.
but your mother turned out to be a great inspiration to you, and you talk about her as being this woman who could do great voices and would inspire you, and so that was very important to you.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things that only in later life I've really started to appreciate. I had a very strong narrative that it was all me, I'm self-created and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. And it's as I've gotten older, I've realised that the rock that my mother was the firm foundation that I could stand on and create everything that I have in my life. So I'm glad that I've at least at some point in my life started to appreciate that. But yeah, she's massively important, and she's almost like water to a fish in the sense that it's so important, but you don't think of it every day. You don't realize it's there. You don't realize its significance in your life.
Yes, you suddenly become aware of it. And you realise how important that is. And you said she was great at doing impersonations. Do you have you obviously can do. Do you have a favourite impersonation that you do?
That I do. A mate of mine said when we were writing together, he always said whatever impression I was going for sounded like someone else, and so I tried to do the someone else, and he's like, "Now you sound like someone else." So we'd sort of be playing this sort of impersonation tag thing, where I was like, "Oh, now do I sound like Obama?" He's like, "No, it's sort of like Oprah or something." What were you going for?
You've gone from Obama to Oprah. That's a kind of good one. Yeah. Hey, all encompassing. It does everything.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to say. I can do an impersonation that you can interpret and make it sound like whoever you want it to be like.
That's wonderful. But so you left school. I think you went into TV production, or and you were sort of behind the scenes, and gradually moved. You did stand up and then became a TV comedian, then actress. So how did that progress work?
Yeah, so I mean, after school, I wanted to, take my education further, and I felt like I wanted to be involved in the arts somehow, but I just didn't have the guts to really just go for it. And some peers went off to drama school, and it just didn't occur to me that someone like me could do something like that. So I went to a place called Ravensbourne, which focuses more on behind the camera stuff. So they taught us how to make TV programs, basically. And so I went into post-production. So I worked in editing and, sound post-production and stuff like that, just basically facilitating other people's creativity. So I had an operational job. I wasn't even doing the stuff. I was like organizing and booking in this type of work. And then it just got to a point where I was feeling like, this isn't enough for me. I love parts of it, but it doesn't fill me up completely. And that's when I decided I wanted to be an actor. Had no clue how to go about doing that. Didn't know where to start. Happened to be working with some actors, and they gave me some advice. And so I just thought, let me just jump in and see what happens. And then after a few years, I kind of reached this equilibrium where I was getting little bit parts here and there, but work was starting to dry up, and I was spending more time on a reception desk than I was acting. So I thought, what can I do that will give me stage time, will get rid of this stage fright that sort of big gaps between performing was starting to create. And that's where stand-up came in. So I'd already been acting like 4 or 5 years, and it was more out of like necessity and curiosity in a way that made me think, all right, let me just see if that would give me a bit more control over my creative life. So that's why I started doing stand-up.
Stand-up must be the hardest thing in the world to do. Literally, because there's no help, there's nobody around you, it's just you. How did you find that?
Well, it was two things. Like I say, it was partly to do with a necessity. I was really experiencing stage fright whenever I was going for auditions, which were becoming, few and far between. And so I just wanted something where I could have a bit of control. And but I also love stand-up. And I thought I could do it. I think I'm a funny person, right? I was thinking that at the time. I was thinking, why don't I give this a try with no thought of what the outcome could be? But the thing is about stand-up, I'm realising, having done a few years of it and been done many of the things that stand-ups aspire to do, is that we've got a particular gene or something that makes us want to be there. So when people talk about, oh, it's the most scary thing in the world, well, yeah, for you, but for us who have this bizarre gene that wants us to experience the possibility of existential death, on the possibility that we may actually get loads of love from the audience that are watching us, it doesn't scare us that way. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. We'd feel the same way about it as everybody else does.
I can see another use for gene therapy there. We get a funny gene implanted into us. There's a Shakespeare said, laughter is but sorrow masked. Is there sorrow in your stand-up?
Do you know, there wasn't. I mean, I don't do stand-up anymore, but so I say it in the past tense. There wasn't. But where I got to by the time I decided that my journey with it was sort of complete or done for now, was that the things that were really concerning me, I didn't know how to make them funny. The things that were of interest to me, I couldn't spin it. And I remember sort of I wrote this whole page of material. And I never write stuff out in long form. I always just write bullet points. But I wrote this out in long form and read it to an audience, and I could just feel them sort of curdling under the unfunniness of it. So I was like, this is not the way to go. Maybe there's another outlet that I'm supposed to use for these thoughts, this material that I want to discuss. So
your advice to somebody if they're going to do stand-up is
be funny.
And be funny is what?
It's such an obvious thing to say, but it's just go for it. The thing with stand-up that's different from so many other sort of creative pursuits is that you can't do it at home. You can write at home, but you can't know of its success until you perform it in front of an audience. So you've got to sacrifice yourself. You've got to kind of go, I'm just going to get up in front of people and I'm going to do it. You do. You have to sacrifice comfort, really, and risk yourself. And there's no two ways about it, in a way that you just don't have to necessarily with other art forms.
Yeah. It's almost kind of, it's I'm just thinking about that because it's interesting. It's, if you're a sports person, you practice and that practice and the practice and you get better and better. And obviously you get better and better, but you don't suddenly go, right, you've got to step out, if you're a tennis player, onto the centre court at Wimbledon and play. You gradually get there. You're saying, in a way, and I completely understand that, you've just got to get up there and do it. And that way you begin to really understand it.
Yeah. And the interesting thing as well is that, and maybe this applies across the board, but that first gig you do can feel like centre court straight off, so because it's so exposing, or it can feel so exposing. It can feel exhilarating. Some comedians just exhilarated by the experience of being in front of an audience. But yeah, that can be your centre court, and there's only like 20 people in the room.
And it still matters, yeah. Can you remember the first time you stood in front of the camera and had to perform?
Was in front of a camera or on?
To perform.
My first performance on camera was in EastEnders. I think that was my first TV job.
Oh, wow.
And it was a scene with Natalie Cassidy, I believe, is that her name? Yeah, Natalie Cassidy played Sonia in EastEnders. And my mind was blown just being at Elstree, meeting Wendy Richard earlier and Ian Lavender, and they were like, good luck, Andy. And it's like, they know my name. How do they know my name? It was a pretty special day.
You've really got to, I mean, again, because this is about sacrifice, but you've got to sort of let so much of your own inhibitions go, I always think, to be an actor, to kind of get in front of the camera, to be someone else, and to kind of completely lose yourself and become this other person. Was that easy doing that?
It's been like an ongoing journey for me in terms of learning the craft of acting. I didn't do like a 3-year drama school thing, so I had to learn on the job, and that came with a big dose of imposter syndrome. But in terms of sort of diving deep into characters, losing myself in them, stuff like that, that's something that I'm learning to allow myself to do, because as an actor we still have hang-ups. There are still scenes and moments and things that we're asked to do that we just think, I feel really stupid doing this. So we're just like everybody else in that sense of there's always going to be a thing that someone has you do and you're just like, I feel like a wally, but all right, let me just give it a go. But I think probably our threshold is just a little bit lower than other people's.
I'm going to ask you now, because there's a huge amount of talk about people from, and I don't like sort of saying ethnic minorities. I loathe that phrase. I think we should talk about ethnic necessities, because I think a mix of ethnicity is what adds to creativity. But what would you say to people who come from a background where it's harder, it seems, to get noticed? You've done it. You've been, I would argue, a huge success. What advice would you give to somebody who might be listening to this saying, I'd like to do what Andy's done, but I live in a very deprived area, I don't get the encouragement? What would you say to those people?
I think just do it anyway. Find a way. Because if I can do it, and without going too much into my sort of family history, there wasn't a lot of money. It was a single parent household in the East End. There are a number of things that one could look at my situation and go, well, you're never going to get that career starting in that place. And actually, I even believe that, despite the fact that I went for it anyways. So I think whatever your circumstances, there's someone from your sort of underrepresented group who is doing it. So take inspiration from them and just do it anyway. That because of the way that like social media is and what a tool the internet can be, there's ways to circumnavigate the sort of more formal structures of getting a creative career off the ground. And so you can use that to get what you want, rather than feeling like, oh, the formal routes aren't really available to me. I can't afford drama school, I can't afford art school, or whatever it is. But there's other ways to get your work out there for people to be able to access them and experience your creativity.
Believe in yourself.
Yeah, don't do what I did. Believe in yourself. Don't wait until you're 30 before you make the leap. If you feel it now, just go for it. But also know that it's never too late either. So if you're 40, 45, 50 and you think, I've always wanted to try this thing, go for it.
How many great actors have won Oscars in their 70s? There are quite a few, actually, so remember that. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, Viola Davis got her Oscar for The Help. I think she was like 52, and she'd had like 20-year career already, and she'd won Tonys and stuff like that, but we didn't know her name until The Help.
Yes, exactly.
So you're absolutely right. It's never too late.
You're listening to Sacrifice and Success, a podcast brought to you by independent media agency Electric Glue. What is one of the biggest sacrifices you've had to make for your creative work?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I think of them more as choices, but they are things that I don't have because I've chosen the life that I have. And so one of them is family, but I feel like that's a partially conscious choice. So it is a sacrifice in the sense that I don't have a life really where I think that could work. I don't think I could start a family. I mean, it's probably a bit late for that now biologically, but even sort of non-biologically, like adopting or something like that. Even pets, I feel like, I don't think I can commit. I just, so because I applied for a dog at Battersea Dogs Home and there's been no matches come through. And as part of me, it's kind of relieved.
And it's saying, maybe this isn't right for me.
Yeah, I mean, I do trust those signs. Like, rather than get impatient about it, sometimes I do think, maybe this is a sign, because I could do something about this if it was right. But actually, nothing's come through, and I'm actually living a life that I would have to change to have a dog in this life. So maybe this is all for the best on both parts. Maybe that dog needs to go somewhere else.
I mean, creativity is quite a selfish pursuit, isn't it? Because when you're having an idea or you're working on an idea, you can't stop and start. You just have to keep going. I'm sure if you're an accountant and you're trying to balance books, and we mustn't have a go at accountants, they're wonderful people, but you can stop and start. And lots of things you can stop and start. With creativity, it isn't a button that you can just turn on. It's there all the time, and you've got to do it, despite what's going on around you. Have you found that difficult, or do you experience that?
Yeah, I completely relate to that, and it is difficult sometimes because, I mean, a friend I was talking to recently used the term workaholic in reference to me, and no one's ever said that before, and it really gave me pause because I was like, am I? I never thought of myself like that. I thought I just worked hard, or I thought I just really loved what I'm doing. But actually, you're right. It is almost like this train that's sort of driving through you, like creative thoughts constantly. Like particularly, I remember when I was writing stand-up, sometimes it would get annoying the jokes that kept coming into my mind. Oh gosh, right, I've got to write that down. So I had to sleep with a notebook by my bed, like this constant sort of yammering in my head, where sometimes I'll be like, just stop, I just want to sleep, you know. But yeah, so it does get difficult sometimes of like letting go and allowing balance, you know, so that there's friends can, you know, you can spend time with friends and family and just relax and just watch a bit of TV or something. That is the challenge I'm in at the moment, actually, is starting to bring more balance in and not have everything be about work. Just because I'm enjoying it doesn't mean I have to do it every single day, every hour of every day. Yeah,
that is important, isn't it? Because I say to people, you know, again, partly as a creative person, you're absorbing all these influences, you're absorbing what's going on around you, and you know, it is that thing that you have to balance that out with kind of time to do it, but allow yourself these moments when you're going to overhear conversations, you're going to see things, and you're going to put that into your performances or whatever it is you might be doing. I love that expression that creativity isn't an occupation, it's a preoccupation. I think it sums that up. You know, it's you're living it. You know, there isn't, as I said, there isn't an off knob. There are a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. First of all, line of duty. Now, what's it like being dead? Now you're. I mean, it's brilliant.
Best job I've ever had.
Best job. It must be wonderful to be in that, because it's become this cultural phenomena, line of duty, hasn't it? I mean, it's just sort of. I mean, the writing is brilliant, and the way it constructs the plots and leads you up garden paths. It must have been wonderful being part of that.
Oh, definitely. And, you know, when I'm a fan of a show, I have this sort of ambivalent relationship with auditioning for it, because it's like, I feel like almost like I don't want to spoil it by being in it, you know. But when I got the call, I was just like, obviously, I want to audition for this. And being in it, seeing the team, it's kind of weird because I'm trying not to be like a fangirl, but I completely am. I've already watched like all the episodes up until the point where I started filming twice.
and of course you don't know, do you? You don't know what the fight. You don't know who killed you, do you?
I don't, and that's the weird thing about it. So I'm now watching these episodes like a fan, and people are sort of like, "What's going on, Andy? Who did who's H? Who's the fourth man?" It's like, I don't know. I'm watching it like killed. You guys. Exactly.
What are you asking me?
I don't know if you remember, but yeah. So that's really fun to be in it, and then also to just enjoy it as a fan as well. So I get the best of both worlds for sure.
Isn't that brilliant? And the other thing, you have your debut novel. It came out this year, Asking for a Friend. You know, some people say writing's very difficult. Some people say it's very easy. How did you find it?
Gosh, I mean, it's both, really. It's easy in the sense of, yes, I know words. I know how to put them in order, that they make sense and all the rest of it. But it's difficult in the sense of, now, can you put those words in an order that's really good and is going to create an enjoyable read? Do you know what you're doing? Because when I started, I didn't. And even now, I'm still learning. I'm writing another book now, and there's so much to learn. And I say it was like one of the hardest creative challenges I've ever had. And, you know, you talk about sacrifice. Well, the sacrifice I had to make for that was that my acting career had to go on hold a few times, because I just couldn't reconcile the more immediate demands of like auditioning or going away and filming with the quiet and sort of more still relationship you have to have with your creativity to write a book. And so, you know, acting requires me to be quite reactive. Auditions can come in very last minute, the night before. They want it the following morning. And that was kind of messing with my mind and creating quite a lot of stress. So I had to say at one point, okay, right, I'm not going to audition. I've got another edit that I need to do of this draft. After that, then I'll go back to editing. So that was a sacrifice that had to happen to be able to realize the book. Otherwise, it just would not have existed.
And the courage to go, I'm going to turn that down because I've got to just focus on what I'm writing right now.
Yeah.
Somebody once said to me, and I was talking about writing, because I'm an art director by trade. So I went to art school and was going to be a painter and all that. So I became an art director. And we talked about writing, and this Frank Delaney, his name was, a great novelist, said to me, John, he said, but writing is just describing pictures, which I thought was a wonderful way of defining it, because you then have a picture in your head, and write it down, because we all think visually. Do you have a process for doing that? Do you have a process?
That I really, really love that description, because that's exactly what I do. And especially when I get stuck, is I visualize for a moment and then just describe it. Describe what I'm seeing in my mind's eye. So yeah, I really love that. And then beyond that, in terms of a process, I really do need like structure. I thrive best, especially when it comes to writing novels, like I've written loads, like I'm literally doing my second one, but like knowing I'm doing 10 till 11:30, and then there's a break, and then have another 90-minute session like that, and knowing that okay, this day is about chapter X, then it's going to be chapter that day, then that. I fly through it, and I feel like I'm getting somewhere. I'm not the sort of person who can just, I feel like writing today, or I don't. I've got to plan stuff out, and that really, even though it maybe sounds counterintuitive in terms of like cultivating an environment that brings out your creativity, for me, within the structure, that's when I'm able to thrive.
That's interesting, that, isn't it? Because people often, that whole thing about creativity, I often think somebody once said I'm cursed by being creative, in the sense that you've always got to get things out of you, and you're going to get disappointment, and you're going to get... Do you find that? Is there any sort of side to it that you feel you've been cursed with creativity?
That's interesting. I would never think of it like that, but there are things that come with it that aren't savoury.
The tortured artist is the kind of... I'm sort of getting in my brain here, yeah.
Constantly comparing oneself to others, even though they're often not even comparable. The rejection that we have to experience, the criticism, the thoughtless comments sometimes that people make about our work or our creativity, things like that. That's all part of being a creative that you wouldn't necessarily want. But I suppose those things are necessary, and they make the joyful moments more meaningful and more, more appreciated. So, yeah, I mean, even though ideally you wouldn't want all that stuff, it sort of is necessary to make the sweeter stuff even sweeter.
It's part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think that lovely thing of creating something out of nothing, your first book, Asking for a Friend, I mean, there it is. There was nothing, and now there is something. And I think that's one of the brilliant things about creativity that I love. It's only your imagination, and that's what made it happen. Tell me a little bit about Asking for a Friend, because was that very much you in that story, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've said to people before, if you read that book, you'll know me, because there's so much of me in there, not necessarily specifically in terms of events. Some events I've taken from my life, but and maybe I've changed some details so that I don't get sued. But in terms of like the characters and what they
lawyers'
do,
letters, never good, never good,
exactly.
And they're not very funny either. They're not
exactly
very funny.
Not a good look. I've already preemptively had a lawyer's letter from what do you call it? Not a lawyer's letter as such, but a lawyer's email from Cards Against Humanity, because they all seem so fun, and I was like, oh, hey guys, listen, I'd really love to use your game in my next book and stuff, and their website's so chipper, and they're like, hey guys, yeah, just get in touch, blah blah blah. And then so I wrote them this email, and it was quite a little chirpy, funny email, and they were like, absolutely not, you cannot use Cards Against Humanity, you cannot even suggest that Cards Against Humanity is in this book, you cannot use cards against anything. You know what I mean? So I was like, whoa, what happened to, oh yeah, we're so fun and we just do all these stunts around the world.
The lawyers have moved in.
Exactly. I was like, well, that's the last time I played Cards Against Humanity. So yeah, so Asking for a Friend is really who the characters are is me. Little slithers of me, either now or at the age that some of those characters are. So for example, with Megan, she's the youngest of this trio of friends. She's very tells it like it is, very forthright. Simi, who's mid-30s, she's a love puppy. She just wants to fall in love, and she's constantly looking for the one. That's very much who I was at that point. And then the older one, Jemima, who's sort of early 40s, she's much more closed off. She's much more compartmentalized, and she kind of she sees love as not worth the risk. So she cuts herself off from it. And so they're all going to go, they all have their own Achilles heel when it comes to love. And they all go on a journey to not intentionally, but they're forced into this journey to really unearth who they really are and what they really think and feel about love.
Did you find it therapeutic? Was it like therapy writing?
Yeah, I mean,
because you are writing essentially, a lot of it you're saying is about you.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it was just like really fun writing something funny as well, because by the time I'd started writing the book, I really had already left stand up behind by a couple of years. And so it was just a nice release to just let the funny out somewhere, because it wants to still find a home, even though I'm not going on stage and performing it. It still does want to come out of me in some form. So it was nice to put that in the book. But then what I really wanted to do, and this is why I moved away from stand-up, is I wanted to say something with it. And so the middle of the friends, who's the one who's 36, her dad left the family home when she was 7. And that's what happened to me. And
Right.
through her journey in terms of this dating game that they all go on, she starts to see the impact that his absence has had on her and the choices that she makes in her life. And as I was writing this for this character, I was realizing, like really having to look at my own life. Obviously some stuff I'd already realized in relation to my dad, but as I wrote this character out, I was realizing more, and then giving it to her as part of her story and a part of her realization in terms of, what she saw around all of that. So in that respect, I really got something from these characters for my own life.
And the courage to expose yourself. It's quite, I admire that, I often say to myself, would I expose that bit if I was to write a bit? We've all got secrets, but I think you have to let go and do it, don't you?
Yeah, you do, I think. And what I think is really important is to at least have some degree of okayness with it when you do share it. Because I remember doing a storytelling course and the final, I think we were meeting for like 6 weeks. And then the final week, we all had to tell a story. And one girl told a story where she was clearly not reconciled with the thing that she was talking about, and it was difficult to watch. So when people share, audiences need them to be at least a degree of okay, or okay with their not okayness. Do you know what I mean? Like if it does take you to tears, that you're still present and you're still okay with the fact that it can still move you. But she was falling apart, and it was kind of, you don't want to hear the story. You just want to tell her, like, listen, get to therapy. Are you okay? Do you want a hug? So the stuff that I've put in the book is basically stuff that I'm okay with, or if I'm not okay, I'm okay that I'm not quite there with it yet.
There is a great belief that great art has to have truth at its core. Otherwise, it's just decoration. It doesn't have power to it. And that's obviously what Asking for a Friend has. It has this personal story that people can relate to. And I think that's very profound. You need that. Is there a part you'd like to play? Do you look out and go, I'd like to be in a Marvel Comics movie?
I'd love to be a superhero, but I just don't think I've got the knees for it anymore. But there's a book that's just come out with the same publisher as me. It's called The Jigsaw Man. And it's by an author called Nadine Matheson. And she is a solicitor, and she wrote this book about this black detective inspector who's investigating this series of murders, body parts showing up all over South London. And as soon as I heard about it, like the book wasn't even out, I was just like, that's my job. I want that job. Universe, did you hear that? I want that job, because it was a character we've not seen before on TV.
That's lovely, isn't it? That's great. That
exactly. She's troubled. She's brilliant. She's, in all the ways that we've seen time and time again, the same character, but played by grizzly white guys. You know what I mean? It's the sort of part that like James Nesbitt or Ken Stott will get, but someone like me wouldn't.
They've got problems at home, haven't they?
She's got problems.
Oh no, we've got another detective whose family's broken up because he works too much. Please, can we write something else in a script?
Just a really happy detective who does 9 to 5, hangs up his like detective badge at the end of the day. No, she's got trouble at home as well. But it, what's fresh about it is her authenticity, because she's obviously a South London woman, born and raised there. And so that's a very big part of the story as well. and just something new and exciting. So that's the kind of thing that really gets me excited. Otherwise, yes, also I would love to play a role in Asking for a Friend, if that were ever to be turned into a TV series.
There you go. Why not? But on the detective one, would you write something?
Do you know, it's funny because my agent tells me off about this. Not so much now, but before I used to not do that. I used to just think, I just want to write a good story. And she's like, where's the character in here that you would play? It's like, I'm not thinking like that. I'm thinking, let me just tell a good story. But actually, the smart person, the businesswoman side of the, artist that I am, should be thinking like that. But I don't so often.
I think you should sacrifice yourself. And I think the authenticity of that would make a great part for you, and I think you should. I definitely think you should write it.
I'm on
Andy. Please, can we? If there's something that's come out of this podcast, it's I'm gonna stop saying that. I'm gonna sacrifice time. I'm gonna write that. What have you missed in lockdown, by the way? I mean, it's a kind of. I know it's a sort of like, oh blimey, I've missed friends or.
There isn't a lot that I've missed. If I'm perfectly honest, I've had a lovely lockdown. I'm not going to lie. Obviously, I wouldn't want people losing their livelihoods.
You and six other people. I should introduce you to them.
I don't know, because the things, I tell you what I've appreciated in the lockdown. I've appreciated the quiet. I've appreciated people slowing down. Not everybody. Some people are working flat out and some people are busier than ever. Some people are not enjoying the slow pace. But for example, I've started walking. And I've been able to do it for like a long time now, but as in going for a walk, so I really enjoy seeing other people out doing that, families spending time together like that, where normally they'd all be spread out, disparate, going off and doing their own things. Now they're just walking, nowhere to go in particular as a family. And I've just got my bike serviced, which has been literally sat doing nothing for about 8 years. I thought it was gonna crumble into dust when I took it into the bike shop, and he was like, no, just need some new gears and this and that. And I've been going out on that and just finding that, thank you, London Council, or London whatever mayor, because there's bike lanes everywhere. So it's super safe. It's just a lovely way to experience being outdoors. So
that's a lovely positive message rather than what have I missed.
Yeah, sorry, it's not.
I've got out. No,
I'm one of the 6 who is kind of liking it.
We'll find the other 5.
Yeah,
and get you together. We ask you to bring a quote or a poem in about sacrifice. Have you been able to do that? Would you like to?
I can send it to you. So basically,
you say it.
I'll read. Oh yeah. I thought you wanted a copy of it as well.
No.
This is just sound, isn't it? It's a podcast.
Yes, it is a podcast.
Here, look at this, listeners.
Use your imagination.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll just read it. So I spend quite a bit of time on Instagram, like a lot of folks, and I just saw this and I just thought it really chimed. So it says, taking no risk is the biggest risk. You have to risk failure to succeed. You have to risk rejection to be accepted. You have to risk heartache to love. If you're always avoiding risk, you're risking missing out on life.
Wow. I think that's fabulous, Andy. That's a great message. And it goes back to that question very early on we talked about is if you feel, you want to make something of your life and you're not in a great position to be able to have money or friends to push you forward, then you've got to risk. And without risk, there is no reward. That's a lovely message. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast.
Great success with all the things that you've done. Where can we find you online?
So I spend a lot of time on Instagram. So that's the Andi Osho with a W on the end. But I've also got a podcast about creativity called Creative Source with Andi Osho. So that comes out every Tuesday. And it's basically a show about creativity for the creative in all of us.
Thanks a million.
Oh, thank you.
Andi Osho, thank you very much. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sacrifice and Success. a podcast brought to you by Electric Glue, an independent media agency that believes to succeed in the complex media landscape, you need to sacrifice. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. Next month, we'll be talking to Sophie Birdwood, artist and painter, about the sacrifices she's made to be where she is today. Until then, goodbye and good luck.
This podcast was created by Soho Radio Studios.